Okay, welcome everyone to Octofinal round of NUDC 2023. Before we start the debate, friendly reminder for everyone, including the observers. For the debaters, please make sure your microphone is on when giving POI, or otherwise your POI cannot be heard on the live stream. Second, there will be no toilet break. And third, be mindful for the choice of words because it's live stream. Yeah. If you want to go to the toilet, just go now. Last one for the observers, please maintain the quorum. Yeah, basically that's it. So we're waiting for one of the member from UE before we start the debate.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Koko. Pronouns he or him. Yeah, POI. Yeah, you can just do anything. We are starting the industrial revolution of cars, for example, electric vehicles and whatnot, right? What does this show? This shows currently the prices of lithium and the prices of ingots are skyrocketing, and it is the most valuable resources that is currently Indonesia have. And we say to you, this is the utmost bargaining power that is exclusive towards the country of Indonesia. So proud to propose, right? We regret the banning coming from Jokowi, or for example, from the ministry itself. Right? We say to you under OG, we will prefer, for example, a limitation of exports. Right? We're not saying that we will sell everything, for example. Right? We say to you there will be a balance. Right? What does this shows? This shows even if OO or even CO once under their side of the house, they want to create finished products, for example. Right? This can still happen on our side of the house because we won't sell everything at the end of the day. Right? I'll prove to you later why gradual changes will be better under our side of the house, and radical changes by banning all exports is something that is very harmful at the end of the day, right? Two argumentations. Number one, I'll talk to you why creating finished products can still exist and will be way better. But secondly, I'll talk about the idea of international society at the end of the day, right? First argumentation, why creating products can still happen at the end of the day, right? The mechanization will be, for example, we'll do it in a more gradual way, right? We will still focus, for example, in exporting, right? But we will still try, for example, to develop the technologies that currently haven't been existed at the very first place in creating, for example, electric vehicles, or for example, creating electric batteries at the end of the day, right? If opposition wants to prove to us they want to create finished products, they first need to prove to us why at the very first place Indonesia have the capabilities to do so at the end of the day, right? Considering, for example, we are way, for example, not ahead against the US or, for example, other leading technological advanced country itself. Right, but how does this benefit us? All right, the capital coming from the exports that we'll get under OG will be used, for example, to buy technology and, for example, to create R&D, to create better, for example, electric vehicles or, for example, electric batteries that haven't currently existed at the very first place, right? This is exclusive because under our side of the house, we are the only ones who are willing to sell this at the very first place to create, for example, capital enough to create the technology, right? But secondly, there will be willingness to help by other international society itself, right? Because they will think, oh, if I help Indonesia, I can get the ingots, for example, for a way cheaper price, for example, right? I can sell my technology and I can get the ingots for the cheaper price, right? What does this show? This shows not only we do not need to rely for Indonesian for its capabilities to develop their own tech, but we also can borrow it or at the very least, for example, buy it or, for example, trading it at the end of the day, right? This will be exclusive because, for example, it is scarce, for example, to gain ingots and whatnot, right? Not many nations have this at the very beginning, right? How do you weigh this argument, right? Okay, we acknowledge that finished product might be selling way more under opposition at the end of the day, right? But this is why you need to weigh this argument. But how do you weigh raw products more than finished products, right? A, you will fix the economy that is currently being, for example, being downturn at the end of the day, right? Considering under their side of the house, they need to take the trade-off and it takes a way longer time, right? Not only need to develop the technology, but for example, creating the mass production of lithium batteries and whatnot needs, for example, a way longer time than other than just, for example, extracting it at the very beginning, right? Meaning they will, for example, limit, for example, the economic development that is currently and create more stagnation even after the COVID-19 happening at them there, right? But secondly, I think exactly because we are a fairly developing nation in this capitalistic world, the moment our wheel of economy is stopped, we say to you will be left out, for example, by other developing nations or who have more rapid economic growth at the end of the day, right? That's why we prove to you that the most important thing is at least for the economic wheel to push forward, even if it is, for example, something that is very marginal, right? But let's compare raw against finished, right? Understand the finished products are most likely being created by developed nations, right? This is, for example, the US, Taiwan, and so on and so forth, right? The difference between Indonesia is they already have a different starting point, right? They already have the factories, for example, right? But second, they also have the reputation at the end of the day, right? So even if under their service they have the ability, for example, to create the factories at the end of the day, we say to you, you will still lose against, for example, products from the US exactly because they have better reputation and also their products are way more reliable and are also way more known at the end of the day, right? Meaning the market is not there, right? But secondly, the difference between raw, we say to you, raw is something that is very scarce, right? Not every nation have, for example, lithium and whatnot, right? But the delta here is, even if we say to you, most likely the ones who are selling raw products are developing nation, right? What does this show? This shows the bargaining power between Indonesia and also other developing nations is the same at the end of the day, right? Meaning how our rivals of, for example, sellers have the same starting point, right? But also B, they also have the same market at the end of the day and also have the same reach and network at the end of the day, exactly because they are almost likely developing nation at the end of the day. Therefore, we say to you, it is somewhat a safe ground. But before that, yeah, CO.
You say that raw minerals will create a lot of capital, but look at Africa. Africa have many raw minerals, but they're still poor. How do you prove that will be lucky for Indonesia to be rich?
I think I already proved to you why we are not selling everything, but we are trying to also create finished products, right? The prerequisite of creating finished products is that you need to have the technology, right? This is your burden, right? Our burden is just to prove to you why it is something that is too radical to create to sell raw products at the end of the day, right? But Second argument, the backlash is coming from society, right? A few contextualization, right? We live in, for example, a new industrial revolution where, for example, electric cars are something as the new norm and whatnot, and lithium is something that is being searched for example, by China or, for example, by the Japanese itself, right? But secondly, the bad economy and current status quo, meaning, for example, every nation wants this new industry itself, right? They are desperate, for example, to get better lithium and whatnot, exactly because they want to fix their economy after the pandemic or, for example, after the Russo-Ukrainian war itself, right? But also, three, linking towards the Russo-Ukrainian war, we say to you there's a shortage of resources, exactly, for example, because the embargo given towards Russia and whatnot itself, right? Meaning the market of, for example, selling raw products is still there and still way better at the end of the day, right? What are the benefits? The benefits is A, you will gain way more capital because either A, there are way more buyers, but B, we say to you exactly because of supply and demand, we can sell way more exactly because the demand is so many, and we say to you, for example, the sellers are way less at the end of the day, right? But even if we do not get, for example, capital in terms of revenue, we say to you there can be payback policy itself, right? What is the importance of this argument, right? A, this is the prerequisite of the benefit in creating, for example, better technology and whatnot, because we can gain way more color, but also B, this is the payback politics itself, right? For example, you can gain, for example, way more infrastructure because you give China the ingots and whatnot, right? Meaning China is way more willing, for example, to help you, for example, to create more railways and whatnot, right? The importance here is that many people, for example, in Indonesia, like the railways and whatnot. We say to it is also important in creating better welfare in our society, in our country that is lacking so proud.
Audible? If you want to are just stand up. Don't make any noise. I have attention issue. He, him. Starting in 3, 2, 1. PM speech should lose by the contradiction because the last 2 minutes of PM speech talk about how they want to limit the sellings of the raw materials, but the first 5 minutes say that we want more money because the price is skyrocketing. I'm going to prove to you in my speech why the price is not that high, why it's better if you just produce it by your own. I'm going to challenge all the things about like accessibility. We're going to say that we have the access to do so in the status quo to price all the materials that we have. 2 setups. 1, what we defend here is the decision to ban export of raw materials, meaning that logically, of course, when we want to do it, when we want to produce it by our own, it means that the Indonesian government will have the rationale to A, invest in manufacturers, in technology, for example, but secondly, also invest on the resources, i.e. sending universities to students to webinars of renewable technology whatsoever. So sending staff to exchange US, for example, to learn about how to make those kind of products properly. This is the kind of thing that we can claim because I think it's logical to begin with. But secondly, I think the decision is also rationally made and followed by plans by the Indonesian government. I think it's something that PM never analyzed because they only talk to you about how it's just a debate about comparative. We say that they also have to analyze how did this decision came up. I think the decision came up from Jokowi because there was a pressure from the World Trade Organization because the export of these kind of raw materials are just so exploitative. For example, it came out of all of the protests from environmental movement, for example, meaning that in government they still have to defend why in the long term when they want to don't want to make decision, then they can survive with all the pressure from like WTO and other like organizational pressure from the environmental movement. I'm going to take you in minute 5. I'm just going to talk about one thing about why is it better for the outcome of the processing of the new dormant minerals, and I'm going to prove the capability of Indonesian government. The premise here is simple, that you got to process it to become products on your own, i.e. make nickel and lithium to ionic battery for electric car, for example, or ingots for supplies of weapons for Russia or any other powerful countries. And I'm going to defend that it's likely to succeed because opposition is effectively wrong to go on extreme case. They say we're completely incapable to do so. 3 things why it's likely to succeed. 1, we say that we have a lot of China's investment, for example, in energy sector, i.e. giving manufacturers professional to help those people in process to make them to be better, i.e. giving the blueprint of the production of this kind of production, for example, for the Indonesian government, but it's all regulated with our workers and local government supervision. It's just in China's effort in doing the market expansion to make better supplies from every countries that they can reach to. But secondly, I think that it's also logical about how Indonesia is basically leaning to more advanced processes of these raw materials. i.e. it's out of Jokowi's supervision how the product of raw materials out of mining are so huge. i.e. is how in Banten, for example, you have 29% of the GDP based on the the production of lithium whatsoever that you have, meaning that it's under Indonesian incentive to also incentivize the production workers whatsoever. And it also looks like about how we invest more manufacturers of mining products, i.e. it's what you build on Cilegon, for example, or what you build in Ketapang, for example. But secondly, it's also how we now incentivize much more education for university students to access the knowledge transfer from the other progressive countries that are already good in this kind of productions. But lastly, it's about we have a lot of staff exchange, for example, for those people to go abroad to get all the technology transfer their side of the house. But I think that thirdly, then I think that the idea of this to produce it by your own is also highly supported by the society and other external parties. 1, on society, the narrative that we send to people is that we're gonna produce these kind of things, meaning that we have control over it now. For the people who are already tired, for example, for exploitation, like European countries, for example, that are buying our raw materials for so cheap and selling it back to us for much higher price that are already multiplied. Meaning that society will also have the incentive to believe that probably I also have to support the government. It's something gonna make profit more for our country, for profit more that also gonna trickle down to our condition in Indonesia. But secondly, I think we also have accessibility of knowledge transfer, because I think that the renewable energy is there in the sustainable development goals, i.e. countries like US whatsoever, that OG possible also help us, for example, to be able to process this kind of raw materials. But lastly, I think there's also a huge support, the environmental movement that are progressive, for example, for us to be able to get manufacturers in a lot of areas, for example, since it's also something that is aligned with their interest. I think there's 3 things prove to you that there's a feasibility in our side, and I posit that probably it's gonna take a longer time. But I don't think that there's any urgency from opening government why short-term benefit is more important. I think that in so far that you get more profit, in so far that you can create things with more of profit for your countries and for the people there, we still win. But what are the impacts of it? 1, it gives Indonesian government the agencies to run their own business to get as much profit as they are able to for them to be able to make all the money management, to make all the production that they want to. But secondly, it also gives more profit at the end of the day, since you tell it after you sell it after it's perfectly manufactured. Now I want to note that it's feasible for it to be sold because you have other developing countries that don't have the natural resources to even make this kind of products. You're talking about countries like Thailand or countries like Myanmar, for example. Therefore, you have market, for example, to sell this kind of products to those people or to these countries. But before second, you.
If environmental is your main problems, if you still want to process it anyway, don't you think that environmental damage will still be there systematically?
I'm not talking about environmental damage. I told you that in both sides, if you also sell this kind of export materials in export, you'll see going to harm the environment. So environment is not the debate. The debate is about the profit and about how it trickles down to people in the Indonesian government. And I want to note about the second thing, that also you also have big countries that are pushing for the the betterment of this kind of products, i.e. like Russia who want weapon, for example, or any other countries like Japan who want this kind of batteries, for example. But thirdly, I think that what's important and cannot be dismissed by opening government is also the fact that it also creates more employment in our government. Because when you create more manufacturers in Cilegon, for example, you have more blue-collar workers to get there, for example. If you export it, then the people who get benefit, the employment that will be bigger is the countries that are going to buy these kind of materials, the countries that are already powerful, no benefit at all for the people in the ground. It's important because it's Indonesian government's responsibility to do this because they are failing to pander to those kind of blue-collar workers because the companies in Jakarta only get to those who are white-collar whatsoever. They don't give any spaces for the blue-collar worker to work. It's other responsibility. And I want just to weight it simply. On competition, we said it in their side, they still have to, compete with the people, countries like Middle East, countries like, all the ASEAN countries like Papua New Guinea, for example, that sell this kind of mining also. But we said in our side, profit is more and we can get more employment. It's so important, proud to oppose.
I have two responses for opening opposition. First of all, when they are talking about, oh, we have the accessibility, we have investment, blueprints, education, whatnot. First of all, it both of you to assume that we have that much of resource in the status quo. First of all, remember that even if we have some people, for example, we're not that much, for example, we do not have that much of smart people to compete with another established supplier of this finished product at the end of the day. Second of all, we are talking about the needs of investment at the end of the day, right? We are talking about it needs so much money because this implementation of policy as met last year, for example, by Jokowi, we do not have that much of established finished product factory, for example, to produce these all things, for example, means you will, for example, give more money, for example, to this investment, whatnot, shows to you that, for example, there might be another kind of importance of this government regulation, for example, that will be abandoned, for example, because you will, for example, implement so much money, for example, for this kind of investment at the end of the day. First, it means at the end of the day, opening opposition have to explain to you, A, if they are talking about arguing about long-term, for example, long-term benefit, we question this because at the end of the day, even if right now people are being happy because you ban all sort of things and people are being happy, A, it's just short terms because in the future there will be backlash, for example, they increase the sentiment of people at the end of the day when you do not get validation from international society. But second of all, when investment are really bad, for example, in taking longer time, for example, to really get the money because you do not have that much of market in the status quo at the end of the day, people will also hate that much investment and the waste of money that will exist on your side of the house. So proud to propose. One thing that I'm going to bring in this debate, why everything that we're talking about international skepticism is the most important thing to be talking in this debate. First of all, what kind of thing that we regret on our side of the house? We're talking about the gradual change. We want gradual changes on our side of the house, right? For example, right now, we see that we do not have that much of demand under outside the house for finished product. So it means like we do not need to produce that much of, for example, finished product. It means we can still sell some of our raw product, for example, for international people, and for example, use 20% of it, for example, to our international, to our national finished product, for example, to sell whatnot. But while, for example, giving diplomacy ties, for example, to increase the demand as the time passes by. I think this is a more rational thing to be done because we do not invest that much of money in this in the ones at once, for example. So people will also, for example, get happy at the end of the day outside the house because you also have the trial, for example, have the effort, for example, for the helirization under outside the house. What is bad for this mechanism and the other day under opening opposition? First of all, you gain backlash from international society, right? China and Japan that condemn Indonesia, for example, they have already been existing in the status quo. Even some country report us in the World Trade Organization, for example. What are the results? The impact is we lose in the court, and World Trade Organization do not accept this policy that bad by Indonesia, for example. China starting to hate and give bad sentiments to us. And remember, we still have a lot of debt and tons of debt with China due to BRI policy that we have gotten so years, for example. It means shows to you that diplomatic ties, for example, are the most important thing to be kept under outside the house. We win this debate. Japan starting to force us also, for example, and we also have so much exporting commodity that we get aside from this, for example, and while, for example, we ban some kind of important commodities from them, for example, they will also, for example, do not accept another export product that we have in the future at the end of the day. This is why, for example, making, for example, a bet being a good actor in this kind of economy are the most rational thing to be done. Why this is bad at the end of the day under opening opposition? First of all, resource is really a crucial commodity. Countries' economy development rely on that 100%. Banning means giving them 0% access to all these raw materials. Country no longer able to continue their industry, for example. Shows to you the skepticism with country who have invested in you, for example, like BRI in China, will, for example, will also give backlash towards you, for example, to force you to, for example, loosening the policy back, right? Because, right now, we will not invest in Indonesia, for example, because you also stop us the access whatnot. I think this is something that's most acceptable because at the end of the day, the coal export are something that's needed by the BRI at the end of the day because this is something the most crucial thing needed by China, for example. But second of all, you will be seen as a bad actor. How? You break supply chain in this economy, post-war in Ukraine, whatnot, unstable economy and predictable recession. Country need assurance of supply chain to be able to make economic decision for their people. Shows to you when they do not know where, for example, supply will exist, for example, and how good it will be, they cannot make any good decision, for example, and they just make prediction that is uncertain. Shows to you that this is, for example, make harder for international people, for example, to predict what they should do in their policy. Make sure you will become the bad actor because in this bad economy, and this is not the right time to make this radical movement, for example, make people will hate you even more. Why backlash is better under opening government then? First of all, you still give some quota that at least can fulfill the demand. Not 100% maybe, but at least people, it will be more acceptable, of course. But second of all, yes, excuse is more acceptable. Because what is the reason Indonesia want to ban raw material? Helirization. This is something that is logical, that actually acceptable, right? But the reason why international people hate this is because you ban this 100% and you give zero access for every people. So that's why I think if we ban some or percentage, I think it's more acceptable for people because they also see that, this is some sort of pragmatism that countries should have whatsoever. It's more acceptable under our house. But third of all, you can create better compensation for the finished product. Yeah, but before that, Oji. Please. I'm sorry, I'll just continue. Third of all, you can create better compensation for finished product under outside the house. Why? Two things. You still do not have more market in status quo, even if we ban 100%. At least by making it gradually, you can get more market step by step. For example, seeing what the sentiment or the dynamic in the market, for example, to look for making more diplomatic ties, for example, so you can also improve the production as the time passes by. But second of all, why this is hard to gain market in the status quo? Established exporter have already been exist, and another raw material supplier are also exist outside the house, and we are not the only actor for doing though. So for example, even though, we are important things, but for example, do the pragmatism of some company for helirization, for example, in another country, they also, for example, switch supplier, whatnot. It is also hampering the economy if, for example, we are failed to get market in this finished product at the end of the day. That's why is the weighing this debate? First of all, thing, why international sentiment is the biggest important thing in this debate. It talks about the future diplomacy. Prerequisite people buy your product is if you seen as a good good people. Sure, some country will be pragmatic to want still buy your product, but your rival is country like China, Japan, and Taiwan who have so many power, like for example, EU or the West, for example, who have media coverage to make you as or to demonize you. At the end of the day, and for example, cut ties and also diplomacy. But second of all, weighing the sustainability of this mechanism. This is Jokowi's policy, have implemented this just last year, just 2 years before his reign of presidential. And this radical mechanism and all this backlash will be continued to the next ruling party and the ruling people, for example, where all the bureaucracy are so fresh and do not have that much of capability to continue this radical movement, for example, shows to you that even if this investment fail, it will be, for example, the mistake of the next reigning ruling party, for example. That's why all those things for the continuation are also relevant under the side of the House. So proud to propose.
Yeah, can it be heard like this? Right. I'm gonna be taking one from closing. Government need to pick a stance. They want to limit export, which is the unlikely counterfactual. By the way, they don't have the fiat to claim that. But also they say that there is more demand and therefore you can make more money based on more export. I will argue that it's going to coexist. Then DPM argued that we have no demand of finished products, while Kuku said that electric cars are widely acceptable. So I question that their benefit is at best infinitesimal in this debate. But I would argue that market is also includes things like domestic market, right? The fact that electric cars in Indonesia are really expensive insofar as the industries and the manufacturing companies are not existing here in Indonesia. You need to import those products outside, and therefore that increases the price to be inflated. I would argue in our side of the house, given that you have less shipping fee, for example, given that you have less production fee, I would argue that it's going to be cheaper. So there is a benefit in our side. There is at best marginal benefit in theirs. The first question I'd address is what is a likely counterfactual in Gulf? And I would note that this is going to be independently debate winning. Insofar as the burden of this debate is a comparative debate on which world is mechanistically better, i.e. without the decision, what is going to happen in their side. They claim that Jokowi would release another regulation that only limit export. I will argue that it's unlikely to happen. We have no burden actually in opening opposition to explain why the decision is perfect. Just that it is somewhat better than a world absent the decision, so it's going to be quite pleasant for us. Anything closing chooses to run will be extremely derivative or contingent on this claim. Reality check. The comparative is not a sustainable prospect in Gulf and a progressing economy in opposition, but rather a dying industry in Gulf and a progressing one in opposition. There are 3 reasons for this. The first is the World Trade Organization, and this is really crucial context that has been missed by DPM. WTO recently showed a tendency to side with EU in banning Indonesia export of nickel and raw material, given two basic arguments. First is the allegation of environmental damage, and secondly, anti-dumping policies. But even their law, I would argue that the existence of this decision by Jokowi administration is mandated by the existence of the call from WTO. And therefore, if you don't make this decision on the counterfactual, you will be subjected to a massive sanction, and therefore this relates to the entire extension of DPM about international sentiment. I would argue that going against WTO is a more of international suicide in their side, insofar as there's already a pre-existing, decision and report that you need to comply in, otherwise you will be excluded from things like export and import that Indonesia probably wants. But secondly, right, they say that they're going to be gradually changing. But there's going to be no urgency for energy companies to change absent a clear sanction. Most of them rely on annual profit to things like shareholders, and they often choose to remain conservative absent a clear sanction or ban, because that's how they generate profit each day. They want secure investment and stuff like that. So compliance is exclusive in our side of the house. In order for you to actually transition your economy to be more progressive and more on manufacturing rather than exporting raw material only, you have to side in opening opposition, because that's the only way you can force compliance on these companies. But lastly, the idea of high price price that I think opening government claimed that you can make out of raw material export is not factually true. In fact, it has always been low, exactly because of things like competition from the majority of third world states who are willing to go even lower price with the tendency of being submissive to Western demand. And therefore, you are competing exactly with these states, right? Who are willing to go for a much lower price, and you cannot set a higher price and expect that you can still compete in a market. So these three reasons prove that the harm is obvious. You have no preparation when your limited and finite natural resources run out, and when that WTO ban actually applies. In our side of the house, like at least we're progressing there, right? At least we force companies to change, and at least we force them to be more industrial rather than just exporting raw material. Closing? No. The second thing that I'll address is, even if there's a positive case bias, we will win there too. The first thing I would claim is the likelihood of successfully developing a stable and adequate industry. PM asked this question, we will answer it by 5 mechanisms. Number 1 is Chinese investment. And I would note that this is not only on industry, but also things like supporting, giving expert human resources, which also I think indirectly leads to things like technological transfer and knowledge transfer. Not only that it's empirically true, i.e. from the moment that the decision was made like a couple years ago until today, Chinese investment has never been higher in Indonesia. But I want to compare the investment in both sides, because I think opening government tries to claim investment as well. The first is why China is likely to invest more in our side is because of the idea of return of investment, which is the basis of every international foreign direct investment. And therefore, given that you have a long-term trajectory and China has no urgency to get their profit back in a short time as well, probably they will invest more in our side rather than a dying industry in theirs. Second, investment is only to use, even if investment exists in their side, is only to use Indonesia land or region as a mining part, as a mining sector rather than an industrial sector that they have an urgency to sustainably look after, that they have to sustainably monitor, for example. But lastly, I think China is willing to take the risk, right? Empirically, i.e. all of BRI, China's investment on West Asia and South Asia are not necessarily short-term. They're long-term investment that I think China would have more orientation to invest in our side. I'm going to give one last chance to closing. Oh, go.
Don't you think that Chinese investment are also highly, related with external factor, for example, war in between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, but that makes the debate at best uncomparative for your side. We told you structural reasons why China is more likely to invest in our side, and I think that explanation alone, at least, at best make the debate a deadlock. They need to prove the counter reasons. The second reason is you have general orientation to things like STEM, and therefore Indonesia government has been actively encouraging individuals to get into technological universities, for example, abroad, or even the best universities in Indonesia. Thirdly, is the ease of industrial development, i.e. the orientation of the law in Jokowi administration has always been pro-development, i.e. things like law and job creation that allows significant expansion of companies, even foreign companies, to invest in Indonesia. Fourthly, the reason why we can compete is market segmentation and just more affordable price. I would argue that transporting natural resources to another state on the edge of the world is difficult and expensive. I.e. in EU, they will need a whole gas pipeline in order for them to transfer natural resources. I would argue that production costs in our side then will be much cheaper because we extract natural resources in Indonesia, we produce them in Indonesia as well, and therefore that essentially reduces the production fee. At worst, we can supply to neighboring states because transport to Europe to Asia is really expensive, and neighboring states will probably up into Indonesia. But I think realistically, we can also necessarily compete because of the lower price that a lot of countries are currently seeking. But lastly, it's market, because the impact goes to the extent of the people on the ground, i.e. in Indonesia, batteries are really expensive, electric cars are really expensive. So I would argue that it's going to be a really popular policy that if we can implement this and the price of goods, electric goods generally go down, this is going to be a sustainable policy that will be continued even after Jokowi administration, insofar as people are going to be, this is going to be a favorable policy that people are likely to opt in. Why do we think that this is good? The first reason that we claim was employment, right? Because necessarily you have technological transfer and stuff like that, and therefore you have massive employment in our side. But secondly is the development transition to industrial economy that has been the orientation of Indonesia. We are tired of being the Western puppet of extracting resources. Now is the time to make it ourselves. Negate.
To check audible. All right. We'll be prioritizing corresponding engagements, which means opening. But if closing government want to do forcing opposition want to do some UI, please feel free to do so. Feel happy to do so. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Couple things to outframe opening and why definitely it goes in closing governments. Number one, let's outframe in the idea of economic benefit. Because what we need to understand is that profit and also material benefit sounds good in opening debate, but it's super deadlocked. Two reasons why. One, there are no clear comparisons why your benefit is grand, because what opening forget is that material benefit are super relatives, and you cannot simply bargains in between which one will have bigger benefit in terms of money, right? So I think it will happen symmetrically anyway, therefore it's super deadlock in opening. Second, need to be noted that economic benefit are also super uncertain. Therefore, at best, opening debate runs well, but at the end of the day, you're still going to get a lot of things. For example, external factor that will ruin you, i.e. if you at best have the investment from China, but if China right now have more focus and more tendency into Middle East, for example, establishing the relations with Saudi Arabia, then at the end of the day, these particular infestations that have been proposed by opening oppositions are also something that's super uncertain. And it also highly contingent in market fluctuation anyway, therefore even if at best, your economic benefit and you can sell your products here and there, but if the market say you're not worth it, then you're not worth it. You should not judge this particular debate in between the metric of economic benefit per se. We will prove why there are other metrics that are more important. Second, international push on environment stated by opening opposition should also not be the metric of the debate. Exactly because it will happen symmetrically, since you on their side of the house, when they have continuously attempts of having, like productions and so on, you're still going to harm environment anyway. Therefore, I don't see why that's the metric. So what will be the contributions and identity in closing governments then? We'll prove why the policy will bring direct harms for local miner and also local mineral manufacturing industry. This is important under two metrics. One, it's important because inherently the interest of Indonesian government is to protect vulnerable actor, which is this local miner that will get direct benefit from the direct impact from the policy. And it's also super important. Number two, exactly because economic benefit that have been glorified by opening debate will be useless and meaningless. It will be redundant if you still have a lot of internal conflict, for example. Therefore, we are so proud to propose. But before I continue, yes, sure.
Local miners will still have access to mine. It's just that the resources are going to be produced in Indonesia as opposed to abroad. I would even argue that Chinese investment that exists in opening opposition gives better welfare, better wages, and generally better protection.
It's not about the access, but it's about the structural problem that will exist due to the policy that I will further explain in my argumentation, right? So let's directly proceed, because all the things will be integrated, since I have outframed why economic benefit is something that's not important. So first off, let's talk about local miner and local manufacturing industry and why they will get direct harms from this particular policy. Therefore, this policy is regrettable, right? I will be talking about two perspectives here. Number one, which is the local miner. Number two, I will talk about investor confidence that will give direct harms towards local miner and also manufacturing industry. One, let's talk about local miner, right? So let's do characterize how they work right now. Job of local miner are something that's super special in characteristic because they are occasional and highly contingent to the demand of mineral and also ingot that exists in status quo. The problem with the policy when you try to ban the export of mineral and also ingot towards global market, for example, is exactly you're going to be highly impactful regarding the demand of the existing mineral that will be mined by this local miner. It's likely under two reasons. Number one, exactly because everything now will be controlled by Indonesian governments, and Indonesian governments on-site oppositions will not going to mine everything over and over again, because it will only limit that towards their existing infrastructure, exactly because their infrastructure is not that much and also super limited. Then your demand for mineral also ingot will also be limited. Second reason as to why it's likely is also because right now you're going to limit the demand of mineral and ingot only internal in Indonesia, right? You cannot have the probability of expanding your demand into global market. For example, surrounding country like Malaysia or Singapore will not have the tendency to ask for more mining in for Indonesian miner and so on. So what is the impact then, right? The impact is pretty clear. One, exactly because they get direct harms in this, because since the demand will be limited, they will also lost job opportunity, for example. They will lose, more and more projects that will significantly harmful for their life at the end of the day, right? But second perspective then, let's talk about investor confidence here, right? We say investor confidence will also going to be impactful and will get the significant harm. Why is that the case? Understand the extensive implementation of this particular policy, right? Which never have been characterized by opening. I think this policy, it's not limited only to the prohibitions of exporting the mineral also ingot, but also how Indonesia's government right now try to take over a lot of company in mineral industry. For example, Indonesia have been investing so much in taking over PT Inka, for example, in aluminum industry, which exactly prove to you as to why it's something that give Indonesian government incentive to take control over every single mineral aspect that exists in Indonesia, right? To prevent the export that comes from private properties. So why it is harmful and why it will give direct harms, right? Exactly for the society and local miner and local manufacturing industry. Exactly because it will make and it will make loss of confidence in term of this particular investor or private company, for example, to invest in Indonesian manufacturing industry because they think that all the benefit will go to Indonesian governments and they cannot do their own export and import because it all have been controlled by Indonesian government at the end of the day. So what are the grand outcome that we are talking about and why it's super important? Two things. One, exactly because you're going to give harms towards your own local citizens, local miner and such. I think it's inherent concern of Indonesian government. Therefore, principally and fundamentally, it's important. It will stand irrespective of the outcome. Number two, it will also give grand harms in regards for Indonesian government because if you have economic benefit that much, but you still unable to, solve the internal conflict of Indonesia, a lot of people feel unsatisfied with your policy, for example, all of your people get direct harm from that. Exactly, you will have to reallocate your budget that you get from economic benefit into solving this particular problem, which I think makes two outcomes. One, your economic benefit will be redundant. Number two, it will be zero-sum on the waste of policy, therefore the policy is bad. So what are the comparisons then, right? I think it will be much better in closing governments, exactly because right now when you're not going to prevent people from exporting, more demand will be there, more local farmers will be protected. I think will make everyone happy. Therefore, we are so proud to propose.
Hello, testing. Good. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Indonesia has an untapped potential, and I don't think it's regrettable for us to even tap. I think opening debate has quite thick likelihoods, even if OO is thicker than government. I think that makes the debate very shallow to just focus on likelihood. So let's bring the principle. Why is this then important for developing country? It's important because I don't think you should regret your decision to ensure the growth of the economy, especially Indonesia, who by context have been extorted by their minerals since colonization. This at least tries to liberate us from the subject of just relying on our minerals by the government. It shows that it's still useful at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, if you only focus on minerals and you have no urgency to push onto education, it eventually runs out, right, minerals? I think Indonesian also value the property of our lands and our minerals, and who by context been colonized and extorted by their gold, things like that. That's more valuable for us to actually opt into this, even if it's not that useful in the very short term. I think in the long term, then it will give us a very good potential to give a competition. Doing this have shown to people in Indonesia that they're willing to grow, not to overly extorting for just small money at the end of the day, because this push company to produce things that one is more developed, to create their own technology, which already happens, right? They improve their strategy, this means that they give them more money at the end of the day by giving them, it's not just minerals, but there's an untapped potential, right? Indo is also one of the 4 or 5 countries with the largest economy, so this is likely going to boost their activity as well, especially developing countries need this stability, right? So I don't think, OG, just by them saying that, they don't completely ban these things, they just limit it. Just because they limited it doesn't mean people won't abuse these kind of things, because likely people are just going to focus this. It's simply not enough, because people really need to push this, especially with the characterization of Indonesian businesses, right? You really need to push innovation. If you're only limiting for easy things, it's easy for Indonesian businesses to justify that, we did enough, we don't care about the development, we'll just focus on the minerals anyways, right? This way, people who don't own raw businesses, people who aren't in the business, get more jobs that aren't likely just mining. Exhaling toxic lithium, exactly if CG wants to help toxic people, miners who inhale toxic things, it happens better in our side, because they at least became more developed and they learn how to make preventing toxic lithium and actually being better miners, giving them any other means of getting a job, right? So I think in CG's case, even if their vulnerable actor is really outside of this debate, it still gets help better in our side, right? CG is just trying to deadlock the opening, introducing a new vulnerable actor, but they still get hurt anyways. They still mine anyways. But at least in our side, they develop the tech to do that, because it pushes the idea of STEM. Notice how the parameter of being regretful doesn't only rely on the likelihood, but also whether or not it's okay to liberate yourself. As an Indonesian government who's previously been colonized, we try to differ from OO. Okay, even when we aren't that advanced yet, I think it's okay to set back a little, because I think Indo is going to the right direction, even if it's not like you can't really see the results right now. But just because the policy has been going on for a bit, right? We just see it in social media now. It doesn't mean that there isn't as much results. Doesn't mean that we should regret it, right? We are at least trying to. We are at least going to the right direction with the help of our people. Because at the same time, we're fighting to liberate ourselves, making us more prosperous at the end of the day. Yes, so the trade-off is that we're taking a long time, but at least we're investing in something that lasts. It's more sustainable. This is important because a developing nation needs the stability to ensure that it doesn't just stagnate when it's just high and then goes down again, right? If you focus on the minerals, you can't then develop, right? Okay. I think one of the curses of being a rich country in minerals is that they're stuck on relying minerals. It shows to the world that we are ready to be different, and it invokes a sense of pride in wanting to get into the untapped potential of the Indonesian government. So the likelihood of the untapped potential is good because Indonesia is still recently growing, right? It has a lot of infrastructure, therefore it's likely for us to grow. Yes?
Is it okay for you to abandon people who are your main interest in just for investment like you want for a longer time?
We're not abandoning any people. I don't think there's any argument that in my side that says abandoning any people. If you're referring to people who are working in the mineral sites or people who are potentially given more jobs, potentially given more urgency to give education, yeah, we're not technically abandoning anyone. The likelihood is that if we go into this untapped potential, what good is this is that Indonesia has a growing potential. It has a lot of infrastructure. It shows to you that Indonesia is capable of growing. It also shows that in the status quo, Indonesia has a lot of changes in the education field, showing new policies being made. This shows that Indonesia is willing to change in the STEM field, right? It shows to you that it has likely pushed many people to achieve better right now. It has created people to change their strategy, especially when a lot of people in social media has gained traction in this issue and supported this problem, right? It shows that many people are willing to opt into the development, so it's still likely. If Roji talk about the problem of debt, I think it's fine. Because often this is the prerequisite of growth, right? Jokowi likely has a lot of debt, but he's able to repay this in a very, very strong term. Why is this important then? Is that Indonesia has a lot of infrastructure. Exactly because we invest on those infrastructure, showing that we are allowed to have debt. We want to grow. It shows that people will support this. Even if there's going to be some opposition in the first run, like Jokowi is having, they're at least able to repay that. There's no use of getting into debt if we can't repay it? So we go into debt to at least being able to pay this. In comparison, in government, they go into debt probably because they can't repay the amount of minerals they're actually already exporting, and they can't now have any development in any other fields, right? Because they only rely. Even if you limit it, right, it doesn't mean that these people have enough urgency, because Indonesia actually really needs this kind of push, right? Because they need to develop. That's therefore not enough for OG to just say, oh, we just limit. Thank you.
Hi, is my voice audible? Okay. No, prefer gender pronoun. Just call me by Naufal or my position closing government. POI is just by standing up or raising your hand. No need to raise your voice. Nevertheless, going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels understand that in closing government, we say that banning the activity of exportation is a bad idea for the interest of the local workers. What have we been contributing in closing government, right? First thing first, we will support the local workers by not banning the activity of export. B, we have proven to you how we will protect the investors' confidence. But what will happen in opposition bench? First thing first, opposition bench cannot ensure the confidence of the investor, and B, opposition cannot protect the local workers. Even they said is one of their vulnerable actors, they cannot prove how they will actually secure the confidence of the workers, right? But by the way, regarding how closing opposition attacking our points regarding policy and etc., we say that there is some external problems on the implementation of the policy, right? But nevertheless, let's compare why at the end of the day other team benches cannot apprehend closing opposition at the end of the day. Let's tackle down opening opposition, then opening government, then closing opposition, right? But nevertheless, let's proceed directly. First thing first, a couple of points that opening opposition have been contributing so far. First thing first, they talk about how it could be profitable. For example, the main point is about profit, and second, how it could be supported by the society, and lastly, how it could be beneficial because of the China's investment and whatnot, right? But let's directly proceed. First thing first, opening oppositions often talks about how it could be profitable, i.e. how local workers can be supported and etc. It's one of their vulnerable actors, and they never actually ensure in their argumentation. But exactly regarding local workers, it will definitely not working on their side of the house. Why? A, the moment you ban exporting raw material is the moment you will create a much more harm to the local workers, right? The moment you ban the activity is the moment the demand will be lower. That is what my member have already told you and characterized, right? But B, understand that the work of the local is highly dependent on demand. The more demand exists, the more work, the more benefit, and work for the local, right? No, thank you. But C, even if there is some countries that are a part of the market, for example, like Thailand that the opening opposition have mentioned, we think it will not be enough compared to if you do not ban it, right? Just like my member have already characterized, the more demand, the more benefit, the more incentive for the local workers. workers. Comparing to what opening opposition have already told you, even if there is some countries, for example like Thailand, it will not be enough compared to if you do not ban the activity, right? No, thank you for both teams. But second thing second, opening opposition argues that the policy have already been supported by the society and etc. Right? But we think that is not true. Why? First thing first, you cannot judge a policy by pre-consent of the policy. What does that mean? You cannot just try to picturize everything by something that is not happening yet. You cannot, but no, thank you. But B, because why does this? What does this mean? Because of the society consented before the policy exists, right? They consented on something that has not yet made, right? They able to picturize the concept of the policy, but they do not feel the implementation. They have not felt the implementation. Therefore, you cannot judge the reaction of the society by the pre-consent of the policy, right? They have not feel the regret of the policy after it being implemented on the society. But nevertheless, opening opposition failed to characterize that kind of part. But thirdly, opening opposition argues that the selling of the product, for example, like how electric cars will be sold and etc., will beneficial due to China's investment or China's interest, right? But why does this so problematic in the side of the house? My member have already characterized the external problems that will happen. For example, China's focus on many things, such as for example, Middle East countries or Arab's oil, for example, their interest on Arab's oil. They also focus on Asia Pacific countries, for example, like how China interest on investing on Solomon, for example. They also are in ceasefire with USA in terms of trade war back in 2020, right? No, thank you. Please sit down. But nevertheless, they fail to actually recognize this kind of external problems, right? What does this mean? It proves that China is not reliable, like opening opposition have already said. It cannot be the main actor that they want to actually invest on, right? Invest on Indonesia, right? Another example, maybe opposition want to say that we can actually rely on other actor, for example, like Western market and etc. But we say that Western is the same as China, right? They are not have the main interest or main focus on Indonesia exclusively, right? For example, like how they are being self-interest with their own benefit, with their own objective, right? Therefore, we do think that China's investment and Western market on investment on Indonesia does not reliable and not working under opening opposition side of the house, right? Now, but B, even if you can have economic benefit, it would not be sustainable, right? Why? Markets is fluctuative. Understand that market is fluctuative and changing all the time. What does this mean? It means product may be relevant now. For example, like what opening opposition have already told you, like for example, electric car. It may be in this year, it may be relevant now, but we never actually can predict what will happen in the next 5 years, right? How it can actually be irrelevant in the next 5 years, or even in some extreme case, in next year it would probably not relevant at the end of the day. Therefore, the benefit of the opening opposition house have been proposed does not matter at the end of the day, right? But let's tackle down opening government. First thing first, the only thing that causing opening government cannot comprehend closing government at the end of the day is how deadlocked they are with opening opposition, right? Because there is no clear comparison on why their benefit will be exclusive at the end of the day. And B, they never characterize specific context of mining problems. They only talk about, with opening opposition, same thing. They only talk about how it will be profitable, how it will be economical beneficial, and etc. But my member have already characterized external problems and specific context. For example, like how welfare of the local will happen and how my member will ensure the security of the investor, right? Therefore, opening government also failed in this debate too. But nevertheless, closing opposition also failed regarding how they talk about how the policy works and etc. But my member have clearly stated how the policy you cannot judge the pre-consent of the content of pre-policy if that doesn't exist at the end of the day. But nevertheless, proud to propose. Thank you.
Hello. For my POI preferences, can you give it on the fifth minute speech? I will incentivize opening to give me the POI. Other than that, I hope it's all clear. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech. In 3, 2, 1. Panelists, the most heinous crime to ever exist is when we don't tap to a potential market. It's when we let go and we don't care about other people within our society and say, no, you're too expensive to us and we don't care about you. I think that this motion requires that main principle, and this is what the main contribution the closing opposition brings to this debate. And why is this much more important than other discussions about harms and benefit? Is that we don't ask ourselves ask ourselves. The important question is not whether we can do it, but why we should do it. I think that's the main concern that we must be focused on, and it goes with the status quo right now of Jokowi, because he is a very, very pro-poor president and a very, virtuous one. So I think this kind of narrative is the most important to discuss within this debate, and as closing opposition, I will bring this main discussion. Now, before that, I will try to distinguish with opening opposition. Now, opening opposition talks a lot about, harms and benefit and, the likelihood of investors, but they don't ask about why is that important, where is the urgency of that? And we as the closing opposition tell you that the urgency right now is principle. Is it right to do those kind of things? And it goes with the narrative of Jokowi, and it is more likely to talk about this and much more important. Now, I will talk about opening opposition and engage with their case. Now, opening opposition's main contribution is that mineral is expensive, let's sell it, make capital, good development. But this kind of idea manifests into something bad. Now, OG's proposition will create more environment harm. Why? Because when you do not regret this motion, therefore you approve the idea that it's okay to sell mineral without caring about the environment. Yes, we see a lot of minerals, we see a lot of potential. They just sell it. And what about the safety nets? They don't talk about it. And how does this manifest in the status quo? Number one, there will be exploitation to get more minerals to be exploited will be justified. Why will it be justified? This is justified because there will be the idea that, yes, we are exploiting, but for the betterment of Indonesia. Look, we're doing this for you. We're getting capital for you. And this is wrong, and I'll explain why. Because on the counterfactual, we need to stop exporting, we need to ban exporting, because we need to focus on untapping the potential of the market in Indonesia. And I will explain that with a few layers and arguments. Number one, Indonesia has an untapped potential of hilirization for minerals and ingots. This untapped potential has a principal issue. Number one, if the government doesn't untap a potential of a state, of the state, it is principally wrong. Why? By untapping a potential, it's not representing the whole of your people, the rights of your people, and this is principally bad. Why is this principally bad? Number one, the person who has the potential are not given the same chances as other people who are already embedded in the status quo and follow the demand of status quo. Two, therefore, those people will lose out eventually and keep being poor and keep being harmed in the long run. Now, why must we regret this, and why is my argument much more important than all of the argument today? Now, this is much more important because if we don't regret, therefore we will let the government to keep on using minerals to gain revenue for the sake of economic development. But therefore the government will be comfortable in selling new minerals and create easy money with a lot of with a low cost but big benefit. But this benefit is not sustainable. Indo will still import developed goods or semi-finished goods, and it will create trade deficits, which in turn will decrease the value of the Indonesian rupiah, and therefore will give negative externalities for the whole country, which is very dangerous, and we must regret this. And why is explanation important? Because it is a distinction from opening opposition. Opening opposition is very practical in terms of explanation. They want about incentive and education, but we as closing opposition focus on the principle and the manifestation of goal of not regretting this motion. Now, I would like to talk about the idea that closing government brings that, with our proposal that we must ban exports, it will create a lot of poor people. People will lose on the job because the demand is low. But the current status quo right now, there are many safety nets for unemployment. Jokowi's agenda is very, very pro-poor. So even if there will be a spike in employment from the shift of industry, Jokowi already set up those safety nets for those kind of people. And not only that, if there was a spike and there was a shift in the industry. Most Indonesians are already educated enough to with a lot of NIUs that the government has provided. Therefore, it is still likely that those people who are opt out of the current station industry can still find other jobs within the economy. And before that, PI? Yeah. Oh,
If you want welfare, go for OG, since we proved to you that the prerequisite of welfare is capital that can only be achieved under our side.
Okay. But the issue is, when you gain your capital, you justify that, yes, we must sell our minerals, we're doing it for a better good, but you are destroying the environment in the long run. You don't think about sustainability, you don't think about the local people, because all you want to do in the end of the day is just get capital and goodbye Indonesia. And that's what we don't want, and this is very, very likely to happen in Indonesia. Look at our history. Indonesia has a long history where a foreigner comes and just want to take our minerals without them giving back to us. And we don't want this narrative to keep alive in the modern democratic Indonesia, and this is very dangerous, and we don't want your proposal. And that's why it is very dangerous. Now, going back to my explanation, so about that, about CG's idea that, there will be a shift in the market and people in the unemployment. Even if that happens, most of them are already educated enough so they can go to other industries and go to other places to get their jobs. So not only are stupid, they can get the ability to get other jobs. Now, I will finally conclude my speech with one more engagement to opening government. Now, they talk about, resources are needed in the most of our countries. If you ban, you have better liberal ties and you become a bad actor. And even if that is true, at least it's principally justified in terms of the Indonesian ideology. The Indonesian ideology is based that we are non-bloc country. We can stand on our 2 feet. We don't need external help. This is a very, very Indonesian ideology, and we, in our side of the house, we principally prove that we can still be justified. Not only that, the fact is that Indonesia has a lot of minerals, and it's not being used as it's supposed to. And if you keep on selling them, it won't keep the economy in the long run. And this kind of stance will, make non-Western countries who don't support Western ideas come to us, knock at the door, and ask for our help and ask for our minerals and work together with us. So nevertheless, we will get all of the benefits, we will get the principal just outcome for the future of Indonesia, and that's why we, as a Constitutional Opposition, proud to close the debate and proud to oppose. Thank you.